In today's webinar, we're going to be talking about pooled special needs trust. Hello, everybody. This is Keith Caldwell with How to Secure the Future. We've got a special guest, Stephen Dale, who I'll introduce in just a minute. But before that, we'll have our illustrious person here, Ryan, introduce himself and his company.
Hey, my name's Ryan Platt, as most of you probably know already. But I'm super excited to have another special guest with us today, as Keith will introduce. We started a firm in 2005 called the Special Needs Plan that focuses specifically on families that have a loved one with a disability to make sure that everything's put together appropriately and to make sure that those next support people, those next caregivers also know what to do. And so it's a pleasure to do that. And Keith and I found each other in 2013 and came together to want to continue to educate folks and educate families so they have the best information possible to make the most informed decisions they can, especially for their child with a disability. So we appreciate everybody being here.
Okay, I'd like to introduce Stephen Dale. For those who don't know, his firm is a firm who did my son's first party trust. That was part of the settlement, and they did an exceptional job. So I'm very glad he's here to join us. But Mr. Dale received his Juris Doctorate from the Armstrong Law School and his LLM in taxation from Golden State University in 2011. The Dale Law Firm was established in 1992 in order to provide quality estate planning to clients by working cooperatively with clients as tax, financial, and insurance professionals. Mr. Dale is a disability rights advocate whose interest in the disability community began at an early age. He comes from a family of institutional workers that served in California state's hospitals and developmental centers for over 3 generations. He serves on the board of ARC of California and the Contra Costa County Developmental Disabilities Council. He is also a trustee of the Golden State Pooled Trust, which he's going to talk about today, which serves beneficiaries in California. He's a frequent speaker on a variety of disability-related topics across the country. And we are very grateful that Mr. Dale agreed to join us today to talk about pooled special needs trust. And with that, I turn to Mr. Dale.
Great, Keith. And good to see you guys. Glad to be on board. So this will be the most terrifying part of the presentation. I'm going to try to show my screen. If that doesn't work, we're going to wing it here. So let's see.
And while you're doing that, Steve, Ryan, when you and I are not talking, let's make sure we're muted so it don't have echoing for him.
Okay. By the way, just a little bit more about my background. So, because I am an attorney, so therefore I am somewhat full of myself. So that's just how I fly. Here. I'm in kind of an unusual situation because we have a law practice that does nothing but special needs trusts. I think there's only about 3 or 4 offices I know that do exclusively this kind of work. I am also took over 10 years ago temporarily as the trustee of the Golden State Pooled Trust. Here, apparently temporary didn't mean what I thought it meant. So I am the trustee. I will tell you, for those attorneys watching out there, being the trustee is a whole lot different than being the attorney. So a lot of this here was the attorney. I'm always telling trustees, this is what you got to go do. Go take that hill. It's a little different when you are the trustee and you've got to, make these difficult decisions. So there we go. And as we go through this here, I'm going to start, I think, with a part of a presentation, which is going to be available to you guys, just to get us started. And then I'm open to any questions you might have. By the way, my practice is exclusively in California. I understand that there is life outside of California, so I've heard here. I do a lot of national advocacy work, and part of what I want to do, want to talk about later, is developments in the pooled trust world here, because like everything in disability, it's all in development. So let's just see if we can make this work, and maybe we can't. Hang on. Here, so you can see my screen. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so a little bit about this. One thing when you're dealing with disability, and I'm going to talk a little bit about trusts and how they came about and all of that. I think for the disability community, having as many options as possible, including pooled trust, is what really serves the disability community. So there's many types of trustees. As an attorney, we make referrals to private professional fiduciaries. We make referrals to corporate trustees. Sometimes with family members, we'll talk about the pros and the cons of family members being trustees and that kind of thing. But basically, you want to keep your options. The thing about it, as we start going through this with pooled trusts, especially, and attorneys, is, do I really need a damned attorney here to counsel me if I'm going to use the pooled trust? So I kind of want to address that too. Part of this is that, part of where this presentation goes through when I'm doing the full presentation is that I was on this call about, something similar with a couple of other pooled trusts. And one of the pooled trusts said, well, hey, the greatest thing about us is you don't need an attorney and you don't need to have all that expense. And, hey, on the surface you go, that's great. But the issue with this is, even when you're using the pooled trust and you're trying to sort through, what's right for my family, what's right for my loved one, or if you're doing this for yourself, what's right for me. I think in a lot of situations, having an attorney work with you here to make sure that what you're doing is the correct thing and that you're exploring all the options. I think that's an important part of the equation. Now, keep in mind, I am an attorney, so maybe that does taint this a bit. But, especially when we're dealing with self-settled trusts, there's no single answer for the disability community. It just doesn't happen here. And so hopefully an experienced attorney, not just somebody with a bar card, but somebody who's experienced in disability, is really going to help be your guide. So let's just talk a little bit about pooled trusts themselves. What the heck is a pooled trust? Okay. And we'll go through the history of these in a little bit. I like to describe them as kind of a cross between a 401k and a special needs trust. When you use a pooled trust in a traditional sense, you don't get your own document. You get what's called a jointer agreement here, which is basically a contract about how your account is going to be handled. But otherwise, in most cases, all the funds are thrown into a pool, for investment purposes and management purposes and that kind of thing here. And then in the end, in most cases, it's administered just like any other special needs trust here. So in many cases, the pooled trust could be a cost-effective tool here, because I know a lot of my pooled trust colleagues disagree with the way I say this, but it's, to me, the pooled trust is kind of like the Costco of administration of special needs trusts. It's like, hopefully, for instance, the Golden State Pooled Trust, and we're just a real small trust. We have 250 beneficiaries, and we're able to spread our costs across them. And so hopefully you get a cost savings. Pooled trusts, like the disability community, are very diverse. Some pooled trusts easily partner with attorneys and other advocates. Some don't. Some serve specific groups. So some work with only folks with developmental disabilities or mental health disabilities or physical disabilities or the elderly or whatever. Some serve everybody. It's all over the board. Okay. Now, where did these things come from? And my first involvement with the pooled special needs trust was in the 1980s. The law around pooled trust went into effect in 1993, but there were many pooled trusts before that. For instance, the Arc of Indiana Trust was founded here in 1988, which is, by the way, a very fine trust. Here. And if John Dickerson, the founder, is out there listening to me today, John, you did a fantastic job. And they've been around since 1988, long before the 1993 law. Prior to 1993, you could transfer assets into a trust and it wouldn't cause you any ineligibility for SSI and Medi-Cal, and there was no estate recovery here. And so when you're talking about a self-settled trust, that meant you could put your money in the trust for somebody of any age, and then basically be able to go into a nursing home or that kind of thing. And there was no lien or anything like that, and it was pretty simple. 1993 changed that only for self-settled trusts. And as we go through the difference, there's a huge difference, and put a whole series.
Ryan, why don't you go ahead, give a quick summary while we're waiting on Stephen? What's the difference between the self-settled and the other type he was talking about? Because Ursula's asking that question.
Yeah, so the self-settled means that it is from the individual's money. So from the individual with the disability, it's their money. So it's they've settled the trust, or they've created the trust. Third party, again, means it was created by someone else, and it's someone else's money, right? It's not the child's money or the adult's money in order to start this special needs trust, whether it's a pooled trust or whether it's a non-pooled trust. So again, that's a huge distinction, because they definitely have different rules from a remainder beneficiary standpoint, meaning the beneficiaries after your child passes away. There's different paybacks to Medicaid with the self-settled trusts. With the third-party trusts, if they're written correctly and managed properly, there are no paybacks to Medi-Cal or Medicaid, if you're outside of California. So again, very important distinctions there as you're thinking about different types of special needs trusts.
All right, we're still having a problem with him, Ryan. You didn't know you were going to be up. So
I didn't. It's a little bit of a surprise. Keith always has me.
He's trying to get in, so I'm going to pop. Ryan, why don't you talk a little bit about what pooled trusts are in general, and I'm going to see if I can get Stephen. Bear with me, everybody. We're going to try to get this working. Yep. I'll be right back.
And so again, everybody, so obviously, as Stephen was talking about pooled trust, he mentioned as he was speaking, the Golden State Pooled Trust that he's the trustee of, has 250 participants. Wow, what does that mean, right? And so when we think of a pooled trust, we think of it's basically multiple beneficiaries, right? So multiple individuals with disabilities are part of the pooled trust. Many of the reasons why families will look at pooled trust is because possibly they don't have enough resources to have a trust of their own, right? They don't have enough assets to put into a standalone trust to be managed just for their child's benefit. So what they would do, they may look at a pooled trust. Again, that's not necessarily the only reason. And again, so when you think of a pooled trust, one of the ways that I describe it is, if you remember all the way back to kindergarten or first grade or second grade, when you walk into one of those classrooms, somewhere in the classroom on one of the walls is what I kind of call those cubbyhole lockers, right? That every student comes in, they have their name at the top, they go and put their jacket in there and their sweatshirt, and maybe they put their book bag in there, and then go find their desk and their seat in their classroom. Well, think of the pooled trust as that wall of little cubbyhole lockers in elementary school, right? Each individual as part of the pooled trust. The pooled trust is kind of the whole wall, but each individual, right? The 250 individuals that Stephen mentioned as part of the Golden State Pooled Trust all kind of have their little cubbyhole, right? And so they have their money kind of in that little cubbyhole, little locker, right? Those resources are what their parents put in there, or maybe they put it in there, or however that's going to function. And then what happens is any of their needs first comes out of their locker, but what happens is all those kind of lockers, all the money in there is kind of pooled together in one spot for an investment manager to take all that money and be able to manage it in a cost-effective way. And many times how pooled trusts work, and we'll have to ask Stephen if we can get him back on exactly with Golden State Pool Trust. And obviously he'll know a lot about other pool trusts as well, because as he said, he's got quite a bit of experience in that space. Is that, if kind of your cubby hole runs out of money, it's not like you get kicked out, right? It's not like, they won't continue to serve, because what happens is usually there's some rule in some of these pool trusts that a portion of the assets, if that individual dies and there's still some in their cubby hole, a portion of those assets stay with the pool trust, and a portion might get sent out to beneficiaries or might get paid back to Medicaid. They're all a little bit different, but a part of it will stay in that pool trust, so that if another person kind of runs out of money in another, cubby hole locker, there's kind of a combination fund over time that can still help them if they need it. And so that's one of the ways that I try to describe a pool trust. Another reason why families might use a pool trust is because they don't have a lot of people that they have faith in to be the trustee. And so they use a pool trust because, just like Stephen mentioned, right, he's the trustee of the Golden State Pool Trust, and he knows all the rules, right? So he knows how to manage special needs trusts. So if a family doesn't have somebody that they're comfortable with that and can't afford to pay a corporate trustee, they can use a pool trust for that expertise. Is there any questions that came in?
Yes.
To see just what people might have as part of some questions, and maybe we can start answering some of them.
Yeah.
Can we reschedule, Ursula? Yes, I think we might. If we can't get them back in, we absolutely will.
Yes, we'll do the best we can. So let me
we're gonna see what happens here.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure what that was all about.
Well, let me tell you where we are, just so you know.
I was able to hear you the entire time.
Oh, so you heard Ryan give the definition of self.
Ryan.
So if we didn't say anything right, feel free to clean that up. Why don't we not use the PowerPoint? I don't know if that had anything.
I'm not going to use it. Okay, so just going back to this. Like I say, there are two. Let's see if I can gather myself. There are two types of special needs trusts. One are self-settled. By the way, some pool trusts only do self-settled. Some only do third-party trusts. I'm not sure where I got cut off, but some serve one particular segment of the population. So, for instance, Proxy Parent in California works with folks with behavioral health or mental health issues. Some only work with folks with developmental disabilities. It's all over the board. So when you're searching for pool trusts, there's obviously lots of things you want to look at. You go back to this so I can get through this and we can answer some questions here with and you will have the PowerPoints later to look at. The schematic that I left off with is kind of went to the difference between third-party trusts and self-settled trusts. And I think the reason, even if you're doing this as third-party trust, which is for estate planning purposes, it's good to understand the other trust, because sometimes you'll read things in there and you go, oh my God, well, I don't want that. So for a self-settled trust, that would be somebody who maybe gets an inheritance here and they want to protect it for eligibility for SSI and Medicaid. California, we call it Medi-Cal because we're different. Same thing here. Here is you can put it in a pool trust and protect it, but something really important, upon the death of the beneficiary, there is a lien for any Medicaid you've used during your entire lifetime. Now, by the way, if you contrast that against, for instance, an ABLE account, the lien is for any Medicaid you used from the time the account was set up. So if avoiding the lien is something important, that's something you'd want to take a look at. If you understand that there's a lien, then the rest of it starts making more sense, because there's other restrictions. You can't use it for gifts, because what they don't want you to do is giving it away and void the lien here. So there's no gifts and that sort of thing. Now let's contrast that with a third party or an estate planning trust. With an estate planning trust, there is no lien. So the rules are much looser. You can use it for gifts. You can use it for virtually anything that the pooled trust allows and whatever this thing was set up for. And upon the death of the beneficiary, there is no lien to the state. But going back to this, some pooled trust wants you to leave something to them. Some pooled trust wants you to leave everything to them. Some don't want you to leave. Well, nobody wants you to leave nothing to them. But for instance, the Golden State Pooled Trust here, we don't require you leave us anything. And sometimes when you're choosing a trust, that might be important because, it kind of sets up a conflict of interest right from the beginning. Because the question is, hey, if a request comes in here and they denied it, did they deny it because that was right for the beneficiary, or did they deny it because that's what's right for the pooled trust? Because every dollar you spend out of that trust is money they're not going to get. So, it's one of those things you really want to look at as you go through this, okay? And by the way, Ryan, I'm happy to take questions whenever they come up here. So that should give you like a rough overview. Let me tell you what I can perceive as some of the problems with pooled trusts here, and something we do at the Golden State Pooled Trust, and other offices do this as well. We go back to this.
Hold on just 1 second. So people, as questions come in, I have them, I got them, and I'll present them. But I don't want to cut them off in mid-sentence. So just let you know, I'm going to get to you guys. I see you guys over there. But go ahead, Steve. Why don't you talk about the problem?
I got about 10 minutes of rambling, and then we can actually go on with it. So I won't hope not to ramble too much. So let's go back to this. One of the problems that I have, both as an advocate but also as an attorney, is doing your planning with the joinder agreement, okay? Because we go back to this. Sometimes pooled trusts are really fantastic, sometimes not. They're run by nonprofits, and I've worked with nonprofits my entire life, and I've seen many cases where a nonprofit will make a major change in their focus overnight. And, and here's one of the things to keep in mind. Almost every presentation I give, and here's here, and I'll show you something kind of creepy here. Almost every presentation I give, I like to start off introducing Kathy. So here's something. Here's Kathy. Okay. Now, so once again, this is a 69-year-old with a doll. But there we go. That's the creepy part here. But let's just say Kathy is has a severe disability, but she's going to have a normal lifespan. Let's say you get this whole thing set up, and let's say, set up the joinder agreement to have the trust manage the funds for Kathy. And let's say, God forbid, Kathy's parents pass away. Okay. Well, Kathy's supposed to live until she's 87, right? So this account could run for 70 years. Okay. Now, this is true whether we're talking about a pooled trust or another trust. How can I know? Oh, Kathy, I'm going to put you away. There you go. Back you go. Here. How do I know what is the right choice for Kathy for the next 70 years? And consider this, okay? And we're doing this right in the middle of COVID here. We don't know what the rules are going to be for benefits for the next 70 years. We don't know what the different options are going to be for trustees. We don't know about the programs that we're supplementing, right? I get this question all the time. How much do I need to set aside for my child? And the answer is, how in the hell could I possibly know? Okay, because if our programs are robust and they stay in place, well, maybe we need just a little bit. If they're not, and I tend to be a pessimist here, then we need that much, right? And the answer to almost every question is, I don't know. The problem that I have is with most pooled trusts, once you put your funds in the trust, there's virtually no way to move that account somewhere else if for some reason it's not serving your loved ones properly. I mean, Keith, Ryan, does that make sense here? And I'm not saying that but even take the Ark of Indiana. the Arc of Indiana has been there since the late 80s. That's not 70 years, kids, here. And we don't have a track record. By the way, we don't have a track record with any corporate trustees. I used to place a lot of things with A.G. Edwards because, of course, they'll always be around. Well, that didn't work out very well, did it? Here. I mean, the answer is we don't know. And, one thing about special needs planning, and Ryan, as an attorney, I'm sure you can agree with this. This is a long-term game, It is a long-term game. And you and I, our odds are will not be, you're much younger than me, but odds are we will not be practicing in 70 years. So we don't even get to see the end of the game. Some other young attorney probably going to law school right now. Maybe they'll get to see it. I don't know.
I didn't know that Ryan got his law degree recently. Did you get
I'm sorry, I thought you were an attorney. So
he's like, yes.
Well, there we go. Anyway, going back to this, well, whatever profession you're doing. So let's go back to this. So one of the things that I like to do for my clients and even for beneficiaries, because even with the Golden State Pooled Trust, obviously, I think it's the finest pooled trust in the country. Obviously, it is because I said so and I'm an attorney here. But I have no idea what's going to happen to the pooled trust over the next 70 years. So am I really serving my folks if I lock them into this sort of thing? And there's times when maybe just for cost and that kind of thing, you might. So here's what I like to do. And because we're terrified of doing anything different with the webinar, I am not going to put the language up. It will be in the information that Keith will send you. And you're going to have to get a magnifying glass because there's lots of words here. But what I like to do is I like to have my folks set up an individual trust, especially if they're going to put substantial assets in there, and you decide what substantial assets are. And basically say, I'm nominating the Golden State Pooled Trust or the Leaky Lagoon Trust or the Wispac Trust or the Arc of Indiana Trust or whatever trust it is as the trustee here. But I'm going to have what's called a trust protector. I'm going to name a family friend or somebody I really, really trust that can review the performance of how the trust is working. And if for some reason the trust isn't serving them well, or it could just be that there's a better option down the road, because my prediction is that we're going to see changes in the future, that things we may not even be able to conceive of here. And why would we not work that? Maybe there'll be a better option down the road. Maybe it'll be cheaper. Maybe it'll provide better services. And the answer to almost every disability question is we don't know. So just for me as an advocate, keeping your options open is always the best way to go, period, pooled trust or not. Now, that being said, there's a lot of situations where maybe that's just not practical, because if we're talking about, and Ryan, here's the other thing that I'm going to disagree with you on something, okay? A lot of people look at pooled trusts as this is the place for really small accounts. And it is. I mean, most pooled trusts don't have a limit. So if you're looking for a smaller trust, and boy, by the way, in California, you can't find a corporate trustee for less than $1 million here. You can't find a private professional fiduciary for less than $250,000, and so there just aren't a lot of different options out there. But if a pooled trust is good for small accounts, why aren't they good for larger accounts as well? And it just really depends on the situation. Here's the other thing I'll throw out, and then I'll do something hard for me, is I'll be quiet here. But here's the other thing with pooled trusts, and this could be with any professional trustee. And I'll use Golden State Pooled Trust as an example. We're a call center. Rarely are we ever going to meet the beneficiary. We're not going to their house. We're not going to be, breaking bread with them. We may have paid for the bread, but we're not going to be breaking the bread with them here and all of that. So we're basically a call center. Now we learn a lot. It's amazing. But on the other hand, you know, for a lot of folks with disabilities, not all, it's really important that somebody goes and eyeballs that person from time to time. And the other part of it is, how could I possibly have, if Kathy isn't able to express her needs, how am I going to know what Kathy needs unless I have what we commonly call a beneficiary advocate? And that's another thing that you really want to put into the equation. Now, some pooled trusts, like the Arc of New Jersey, or the Plan of New Jersey Trust, a wonderful trust, have their own social workers on staff. So when there's something going on, they're going, what the heck's going on with Kathy? They'll pick up a social worker and say, you go out and check out with Kathy and find out what's going on. We cover all of California. We're not in a position to do that sort of thing. So if we don't have either Kathy able to do that or a natural support, which we're talking about family here, I got to hire a care manager probably at $150 an hour to run out there and see what is it that Kathy needs. So the other thing, when you're looking at pooled trusts, you really need to look at, how are they going to connect with me if I'm the person with the disability or my loved one? Okay. And many pooled trusts are working on that, and a lot of them are adding staff. I mean, another one, here, I guess I shouldn't throw out all my favorites, but the Colorado Fund Pool Trust, I think, is a model for the country. It is the most amazing trust, and they have an army of social workers who go out and visit their folks all the time. But Colorado's a little different because 95% of the population is within a 1 hour drive of downtown Denver here. We in California, I got people spread from San Diego to Arcadia, which is way up north. And I am not going to have an army of social workers to go out there and see folks. So anyway, here's the thing where I take a breath. Are there any questions? Did I add a lot of confusion?
No, you did a great overview. And Ryan, do you have any questions while I'm going through this you'd like to ask him? And then I will pull some up.
Yeah, and I think you may have answered it already, but I noticed a few questions on here. So what happens if a beneficiary in the pooled trust kind of runs out of their money? What happens?
And it depends on the trust. And I'll tell you, for instance, in the Golden State Pooled Trust, and we're mostly a first-party trust, although we're moving into third-party. We don't have a reserve fund because it's actually, in California, it's not allowed. Let's say you're in Wisconsin, and the big mama of all the pooled trust is the WISPAC Trust, WISPACT. Here, they have a reserve fund that if you run out of money, well, then they use the reserve fund and they continue. And so that may be important for folks. I'd say maybe, I'm guessing, maybe a quarter of the trusts are in a position to do that. So that may be something. I have to tell you, I get this question all the time for us. What does the beneficiary do when they run out of money? And here's not a very good answer. I don't know. I don't, and a lot of what we have to do is we have to budget our funds, depending on the situation, to last as long as possible. But, the problem is it is really troubling because when they're out of money, they're out of money. My personal feeling is that special needs planning, including pooled trust, however you attack this, here is becoming more and more important. And remember, I'm a liberal. I'm in a liberal part of California, so I do not see them pouring money into the disability community. I see a lot of programs failing. I personally think, and this is from a liberal Democrat, if you count on the government to take care of your loved one with a disability, who the hell are you kidding? Here, which is why we must always advocate. And for folks with IDD, numero uno program is the ARC of California, because we know it's your local ARC followed by your national arc, because that advocacy is always, always, always important.
Yeah, and a point about that, because we had Jordan. What's Jordan's last name?
Jordan Lindsay.
Jordan Lindsay is the executive director of the ARC of California. And one of the things he said to me that is important, and I'm going to say to you guys as well, is it is so important when they are out there advocating on our behalf that they have parents come up and write letters to come to some of these meetings so that the legislators can see their own constituents who it concerns them. It's one thing for Jordan to say, hey, we need X, Y, and Z. It's another one for Keith to come out and say, here's a picture of my son, and by you cutting this program here, it's going to take away his program. That's how they win things, is when we come out and help. So that's what they're asking for. And I've talked to you guys about that in the past, that as we continue to develop as an organization, this group here, then we're going to be calling on you to help support the ARC's efforts, because if they lose, we lose.
The only reason we have what we have, because that's the other thing, they don't want to hear some whiny attorney whine and cry about how they need to do this. They want to hear from people with disabilities and attorneys. And the programs we have, these were not programs they gave us because isn't that a really nice thing to do? They did it because, quite frankly, the parents of folks with disabilities tend to be a royal pain in the ass, and they won't go away until they get what they want. And the moment you drop that, they will cut us like, they'll drop us like a rock, So advocacy is always important. Going back to special needs trusts, we're supplementing the programs that are provided by state, community, whatever. But take mental health. In the early days of deinstitutionalization, all the money went into mental health. In California, we got nothing. Here. I mean, it's just disgusting. For developmental disabilities in California, we have an entitlement, but we could lose that at any time. And the only thing that's going to protect us is for you parents out there and persons with disabilities being that pain in the ass, that thorn in their side, ever present. And especially with term limits, we got to re-educate these folks all the time. Anyway, so there we go.
No, that's a good
Stephen,
point.
I saw a few questions in here. I know Keith's looking at them too. We had a question in here of, are pooled trusts state specific, or can somebody in California use WISPAC, or is it all dependent?
And like everything, it depends. So I'll give you an example. With both WISPAC and Golden State Pooled Trust, we are state specific. By the way, so is the Colorado Fund. Now, then there are national trusts, like there's the Secured Trust, which is actually one that I particularly like here. That is a national trust here. Some are regionally oriented. It just really depends. I would make this suggestion, and I'll make this suggestion twofold. For you advocates out there, for you folks that are on boards and, you're obviously watching these programs because you want to keep up with, the latest information, getting to know probably a good regional trust in your area and maybe a national trust, one or two, that's a good thing to do. Now, for you professionals out there, attorneys, advisors, and all that, partnering with a pooled trust, I think, is an important thing to do. But let's go back to this. And this is even from the trustee of a trust. Pooled trusts are not the only game in town. I wish, my friend Brian Rubin, who is a leading attorney out of Illinois, and he'd be the first to tell you that here, one of his favorite sayings is, if you've met one person with autism, you have met one person with autism. Now, as an administrator, it would be so much easier if they were all the same, all had the same needs. It would just make my life so much easier, but apparently that's not how things are going to fly here. And so the thing about it is, out of that diversity, out of those changes and all of that, there is no single answer for the disability community, for any segment of the disability community. And even when we're talking about folks in the spectrum, they just are not with the program. And so what's right for Kathy may not be right for Bob, and that's just the way it flies.
Ursula is asking, can child's money be added to a pooled special needs trust?
it can only be added to a self-settled trust. And by the way, if we're talking about putting money like their SSI funds or that kind of thing, or that sort of thing, putting it in the pooled trust, it's still going to count as income. So if it's causing you a share of cost, whether you put it in an ABLE account or you put it in a pooled, self-settled pooled trust, it's still going to be counted as income. If what you have is a third-party trust, then absolutely do not put the child's money in that trust. By the way, I see this all the time. The SSI, let's say you have a child living at home and they're getting SSI, and I know a lot of parents go, well, that's my child's money. And guess what? No, it's not, right? That money is for food and shelter. And if you are not taking those funds, you know, and by the way, Ryan, maybe it's the same thing. If you figured out how to make a profit off your child with a disability, please write me so I can figure out how you did it and I can take credit for it. Here, I don't know about you, Ryan. I haven't found anybody who's been able to do that yet. Mm-hmm. It probably makes more sense to take those funds to offset your costs. And then what you do with that money is your business, and put that money in the third-party trust or the ABLE account. By the way, we'll maybe get to this. ABLE accounts and pooled trusts are really cool little animals.
No, we talked about that.
Yeah.
All right,
Jamil. We call it the same thing, Stephen. We call it savings through expenses.
Yes.
That's what we call that.
But sincerely, if you're making a profit, please write me.
Right.
Stephen@spt.org, so I can turn that into a paper.
All right.
Here.
So Jamil is asking, do pooled trusts have the same compressed tax brackets as regular trusts? I'm assuming regular special needs trusts.
Okay. Two types of trusts. A third-party trust. It's what's called a complex trust. Now, by the way, it's no complex than anything else, okay? And you hear all this stuff about the compressed tax rate, and I happen to have a master's in tax, which if you knew me personally, that's amazing here, because I am not a tax weenie, but I got it because I deal with fairly large estates. A third-party account comes with a $4,300 exemption right off the top here. So that means that, you know, pooled trusts are usually invested. They ought to be invested here. Ours are invested through a group called TrueLink Financial. We love TrueLink Financial here and all that. And we get a return. And by the way, we're not allowed to discuss the returns, but we actually got it. We actually are in the black right now, which just bases the hell out of me. But, you know, even with these economic problems. So let's say it earned more than $4,300, then anything that's distributed to the child carries out what's called DNI, distributable net income. It distributes out the income to the child without interfering with their benefits. And let's face it, in 95 times out of 100, the person in the lowest tax bracket is going to be the child with the disability. So I actually use special needs trusts, pooled trusts or not, as tax planning tools. I have never had an account, and I've had multi-million-dollar accounts. I have never had an account pay the compressed tax rate. And if they did, I would go to my investment advisor and have his or her head, because there's ways of changing the investments so you're not realizing ordinary income. You would invest for growth, right? Now, by the way, as an aside, absolutely never take investment advice from an attorney here. In fact, generally, it's a good idea to do exactly the opposite of what they do personally. But on this, you know, once again, this is where the investment advisor, whether it's with a pooled trust or a special needs trust, is really important. And what you need to do is be able to figure out what the likely expenditures are. And if it looks like you're going to have more income than $4,300 in what you can distribute, talk to the investment advisor and change the investments. It's that simple. Unless you really want to pay a higher tax rate than, I was going to say Donald Trump, but we probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's not a political show, than many other people.
There you go. There you go.
Remember, I'm in Northern California, so I apologize for that.
All right, let's see. Evelyn is asking, and you may have answered this already, but I'm going to ask because I don't recall. Is there a minimum deposit needed to join a pooled trust? And speak only about Golden State pooled trust.
We don't, but let's just tell you about us. We do have a minimum, okay, fee here, and we do have a joinder fee. We're actually looking at adjusting it, so our joinder fee right now is about $750. So that's something you want to look at. There is no minimum here, but generally, you want to have, for us, you'd probably want to put more than $10,000 or $15,000 in it. But we have some folks who do open up their third-party trust here with a small amount just to see how it is, and then we'll fund it more later.
With like something like that.
I think, now let's look at that between that and an Enable account. We would be monitoring the distribution, so that might lean towards the Golden State Pool Trust in that case. On the other hand, it's hard to beat an Enable account where I know there's things where they dicker about whether they're charging $35 a year or $50 a year, which is like pshaw. Who the hell cares here with something like that? They're a whole lot cheaper. The only thing is in it, and this can be good or this can be bad, if the person with the disability is not incompetent, they have a right to control that account. For some folks, that's the objective. For some folks, that's terrifying.
Hey, Ryan, can you hear me? I can't hear anything at all, so I need you to go through some of the questions while I try to figure that out.
Okay, I can do that. Stephen, so in kind of a pooled self-settled trust, who can request distributions on behalf of the beneficiary? Like who's
normally what you do with the pooled trust is you identify who's going to be the beneficiary advocate, and this would be something you certainly want to ask. Now, we allow the beneficiary to be their own advocate here, where some trusts do and some trusts don't. Mm-hmm. Some folks with disabilities do a fine job. The only thing is you got to track receipts and do all of those things. Otherwise, we use what's called the beneficiary advocate. So that could be a family member. We have a special program here where we're connecting up with disability organizations where they actually do it for a much lower fee. Sometimes we use professional care managers, but here would be the thing on this is that different pooled trusts are going to have different capabilities. And, we go back to that connection between the pooled trust here and the beneficiary. You got to figure out, especially since this could be an account that could last 70 years or longer, how are you going to make that connection?
Yeah, and then
without that connection, you're dead.
Right. And then again, one of the other pieces that somebody asked, that kind of lines up with that long lifetime possibly, is, what happens if the parents set it up with Golden State Pool Trust, for example, and then they pass away and, the individual with the disability was going to be with family, and family now lives in Texas and they moved to Texas. Can you still serve them, or does that mean that you can't anymore?
Okay, so let's say they were moving to Texas. Well, first off, if we identify that right off the bat, then maybe that's something, maybe they should set up an account in Texas. By the way, Texas, I know there's many pooled trusts, but there's the Arc of Texas Trust, which is the big monster trust out there, probably one of the largest, run by Haley Greer. If you're out there, hi, Haley, how are you? Here, we would transfer it. If it were a national trust like Secured Futures, that might lead. A lot of military families hey, they're in North Carolina today, they're in God knows where tomorrow, they're in Bahrain the day after. Trying to chase these people around the world can really, drive you nuts here. And, so that might lean towards the kind of pooled trust you're looking at as well. Yeah. One thing that with us, we actually have a policy that we will allow the movement to another pooled trust. So another group to look at is a group called the National Plan Alliance. Google National Plan Alliance. Now, this is an alliance of pooled trust. By the way, we happen to be part of the National Plan Alliance. And so if I were transferring an account, let's say they moved to New Jersey, I probably would work with the family and transfer that account to the Plan of New Jersey Trust, here and that kind of thing. But hey, look at our biggest export in California is Californians. And by the way, guess where they go? They go to Texas. As an aside, before you move to another state, call the ARC of that state and ask about services. Because if, for instance, for you Californians, the other place we all go is Colorado here. And guess what? They have a waiting list that is that long, right? So I get lots of people that show up with their child with a disability go, I'm here for services. And they go, that's great. Get in line. Yeah. So
absolutely. And so when we're thinking about the pooled trust, do you see the pooled trust making distributions to an ABLE account?
We do it all the time.
So you do it all the time.
We do it for 3 reasons normally. Okay. One is I have to review every single distribution that the beneficiary makes. Meaning, if we use TrueLink cards a lot. And by the way, if you haven't had somebody from TrueLink, you ought to get somebody. But we have to have a receipt for everything, which means if it's Kathy, I'm going through what does she use for her feminine hygiene products and things like that. And guys, I don't know about you, that's just not something I really enjoy doing. And it's really none of my damn business, don't you think? Now with an ABLE account, I can put it in the ABLE account. What Kathy uses it for, that's her business. We also use them to teach financial literacy. I have a niece that was one of the first people to have an ABLE account. She has Down syndrome, and we talk about her all the time. She has no experience managing money because she's been on SSI her entire life and just never had any experience. Well, we fund that ABLE account here just a little bit at a time. And hey, the first expenditures were jaw-dropping inappropriate. Now we're down to questionable, but we're working very closely. Eventually, we're going to hit appropriate. Well, why should we expect anything different because she has no experience because she's never spent anything? The last thing is for folks on SSI, if we funnel the money through an ABLE account and the ABLE account pays for the housing, we don't take the $281 reduction in benefits. And hey, look at that's about $3,000 a year. Hey, I own a boat. I could blow through that in a weekend. But, for a lot of folks, $3,000 for a person with a disability, that is a chunk of change here. So those are the 3 reasons we use it. It's okay. Yeah.
And does it matter? Because you guys run both self-settled and third party?
The only thing that really matters, because we use basically the same rules for either, is that we have a lot of cases under court supervision. And by the way, the court wants to know what feminine hygiene products Kathy's using, even though I do not. Really part of it is, don't they deserve some level of privacy? Maybe. I don't want them going through my checkbook. How about you, Ryan?
Nope.
Although there's nothing very interesting in mine, but what the hell?
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, I know you have to leave. I figured it out. Somehow or another, Siri commandeered my microphone. So I got it. Siri, that's Siri. Anyhow, let's see. Ryan, I know you have to go. So when you have to go, let me know, and I'll just go through the questions.
Well, Thank you, Stephen. It's a pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
For those who are members of the of our organization, in the special needs trust section, there is an area that has a list of all the pooled special needs trusts. I don't have it off the top of my head, otherwise I would do it. There's a website I found that had it available.
And that's probably a fraction of them.
Probably.
But yeah, that's we're actually working on. By the way, as an aside, there's especially for you professionals out there, there's a new organization, professional organization called the Alliance of Pooled Trusts that's being put together. And when that is up and running, and maybe in a year, if I'm still welcome, maybe you'll have me come back and we can talk about the Alliance. Because here's the other thing, there's no certification. How do you know? I mean, other than they have a really nice website with really nice people with disabilities smiling on their website, how do you know if this is a decent trust or not?
Right.
And really, it's really hard to tell, I mean, other than they have a really nice website. There's going to be more standards and that kind of thing going on because this is a growing industry. Yeah. And it's an unregulated industry. And I will tell you, most of the pooled trusts are fantastic. Some of the pooled trusts, they're really used more as fundraising mechanisms here to keep the remainder interest. And their services may be lacking, and it's everything in between. So, I mean, I hate to tell you this, Keith, but there are some folks out there that maybe are not entirely focused on the needs of folks with disabilities. I know that would be hard to believe.
Right. But I think it's beneficial for us to have these conversations that are not necessarily pleasant, but are truthful, because if it's an unregulated industry and there's lots of money potentially in them, it always brings in some unscrupulous, unsavory people. And having those kind of discussions at least allows us to have the potential to protect against it.
By the way, most of them have boards here, and usually we'll have family members on those boards. So that's probably, I mean, I think pooled trusts are really important, not just because I'm the trustee of this one. I mean, the reason I put it together is to have different options here. And it is run, and the nonprofit that runs it is doing a fantastic job. But I think these are really important options. And so for a lot of families, if you're looking at where to put your advocacy time, ask them if, serving on the board. Once again, you probably have really important experiences that will help them make their services better.
Right. It's a team effort. Valerie is asking, and if this has been answered, go ahead and tell me. Can distributions be made to an ABLE account from either a self-settled or a third-party trust?
They can.
Should a third-party trust include a specific provision allowing that if permissible generally?
It doesn't have to. Look at this, whether you're talking about an ABLE account, a TrueLink card, or even using a credit card. And a little plug here, for those of you that look at my YouTube channel, we have videos on how to use ABLE accounts and how to use credit cards and TrueLink cards and all that. It's just a mode of distribution. Now, in the trust on the law firm side that we're drafting today, yeah, we do have something about transfers to an ABLE account. Should you go to your attorney and have your trust amended to add an ABLE account to it? No. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't spend my legal dollars there. I mean, if I was amending it or restating it for other reasons, sure, what the heck? But it's just a mode of distribution.
I don't want to cover today, but that's one of those points that you can talk to quickly, briefly. I thought you could not amend the special needs trust, that it was a irrevocable thing. There's certain things you can amend.
Irrevocable may not mean what you think it does.
Clearly.
And being that I happen to know that you have one here, I don't think I'm outing you here. If there were a change in the law that affected your trust, you better believe that that trust could be amended here. So irrevocable doesn't mean what we might think it means.
Mm-hmm.
Here. And so almost always it'll have some mechanism, ideally without a court order here, where if there's a change in the law or that kind of thing, you can adjust it. Go back to, it's a long-term game. If we have this set up for your child, Keith, and he lives 70 years, how in the hell could I how in the hell could I possibly know, if they're not going to come up with some rule or change that says if you don't have gobbledygook in your trust is invalid, we better have a mechanism to be able to adjust to that. A well-written trust is going to be able to do that. Last thing, and I know you said brief, but you're talking to an attorney, for God's sake.
I could have known better.
So you should have known better, dude. Here's the other thing to look at when you're doing this is that a good third-party trust. What is it people change? They change trustees and they change remainder interest. Those you can actually do with an irrevocable trust by just having the right language in there that says, hey, if there's a change in the law, or if there's a change, or we need to change trustees, or if we need to change who it goes to when the beneficiary passes away, there's ways of doing that without actually even amending the trust.
And that goes back to, and I'm not necessarily making a pitch for Stephen's firm particularly, although I speak highly of him, but that goes to the whole essence of you got to hire someone who knows what they're doing. If you just go to Joe's law firm, or you go to your cousin who's an attorney, and he says, I'm going to draft a special needs trust, he goes online and finds some little trust document, he creates it and says, here you go. You think you're covered, but you don't find out ever that you weren't until you're gone and your child finds out that it was drafted improperly and it's all for naught. Hire someone that's doing.
Here's my suggestion when you're looking to hire an attorney, because here's the deal. When I first got started doing this, and which was a long time ago, I had no idea what I was doing. There were no guides. There wasn't anything. By the way, I didn't invent it, but in the early days, you couldn't even get your hands on one of these documents. So I finally got my hands on one and did this sort of thing. And the reason they call it a practice is, Keith, before we practice on a lot of people, and hopefully you learn from your mistakes, and you want your attorney to make their mistakes before they get to you. But see, here's the deal. Today, every attorney on their software program has a button that you can press that says Special Needs Trust. I'll give you a wild example. Dante Allen with CalAble, who talks about this openly, who's the executive director of CalAble, and I have a sneaky suspicion, no, I know he's not on benefits. He has a special needs trust. This guy is an executive director. All the attorney knew is that he's paraplegic, so they press the special needs button. Now, see, there's an example of, well, yeah, he's disabled, but that was inappropriate. The thing with it is when you're selecting an attorney, you're not just buying a document, you're buying the experience of the attorney. The document, that quite frankly isn't that complex. Knowing what to do with it, that's the part that's complex. Now, I think the premier group is a group called the Special Needs Alliance. That's an invitation only group. So in order to do that, you have to be a leader in your community here, and this has to be a major part of your practice. And also you need to do things like be on the board of different organizations. Now, if there isn't an alliance member in your area, the questions I would ask them is, of course, you're going to say, hey, do you do special needs trust and how much does it cost? But the bigger questions are, what kind of experience have you had? Have you experienced helping in the administration of the trust? Do you serve on boards? Okay, I think when you serve on a board, you're going to learn a whole lot more about the community that you're serving. And you're going to be a better practitioner and that sort of thing. I would put them way up on the list as well. So Keith, if you want to work with if you want to work with another law firm here, once again, really, you're hiring their experience. And the question should be more than, do you do special needs trust and how much does it cost?
And we have, and you don't know this, Steve, but we have, for people who are members, we have a list of questions and answers to help evaluate whether, if we ask you any of these questions, you would know off the top of your head. If an attorney says, oh, let me get back to you about that, that tells us all we need to know about that. So we have a list of questions and answers that they should know off the top of their head to help evaluate that.
If they don't know the difference between an IEP and an SUV, go to another law office. Okay. So
true. Let's see, guys. We're going to go a little longer. I knew we would. One, we have an attorney who's speaking, so they
I charge $400 an hour. So get your questions in quick here, kids, because Keith's paying my bill today, right?
So Jamil's asking, can pooled trust people specify investment particulars? Can we be sure they're using low expense investments, et cetera? Since they're third party, does the beneficiary have any say? Does the guardian?
I'll talk about specifically for Golden State Trust and generally, but that would be a question you want to ask the trust. Okay. We take into consideration what folks want for the investments, but in the end, I am the trustee and I am the person who is responsible for the investments. And the fact that the family wanted it placed in gold or something like that here, which is not considered a prudent investment, isn't going to protect me if we take a big loss. Now, for the Golden State Pooled Trust with our investment advisors and friends from TrueLink Financial, here we have what are called ETFs. We have a series of ETFs, which are kind of like mutual funds without the load here, and they range from crazy conservative to moderate because doing aggressive investments for a person with disabilities probably isn't prudent. Here we will take into consideration what the beneficiary and the family would like. In the end, it's me. So if you have specific things about how you want the investments done, you should talk to them first. We do not invest in gold. We don't do separate investments generally in that kind of thing. I think we're in line with most of the pooled trusts. I'm actually not aware, but there may be one that will allow individual trusts. Generally, they won't allow an outside investment advisor. Theoretically, they could, but generally they don't.
Okay, so Valerie's asking, who can request distributions on behalf of a conserved individual who is the beneficiary of a self-settled trust? Is the role of an initial trustor one that gets passed along?
Do we know if Valerie's in California or not?
Valerie,
you sure have a lot of questions. So.
We have a mixture. We have some professionals. We have mostly parents, some attorneys, some financial planners. We got a whole range of people. So, Valerie, let us know where you're from.
Well, okay. So let's parse that out. And if it comes back that we know the state, then I can be a little more specific. Generally, for somebody who's conserved, that means that we have a capacity issue. And generally, the conservator will be what's called the beneficiary advocate. Now, keep this in mind. I'm the trustee. So the conservator could say, I want a hyperbolic chamber for my conservatee here, and it's going to be $100,000, and I have $120,000 in the account. I'm probably going to say, could we rent one or could we find something out? You better give me a really good reason why I'm going to expend all this money on this beforehand and that sort of thing. So even, once again, the trustee has sole and absolute discretion, and that's true with all trusts. That's something you should always keep in mind here. And so the conservator would probably be the first person who would be the beneficiary advocate. We, in our documents here, will name whoever the advocate is. So it could be a family member. I mean, it really depends on the situation. One of the reason I was asking if this were California, it would be under court supervision. And anybody who's in a decision-making mode or an advisory mode, the courts being what courts are, they want to know who that is, and they're going to authorize somebody.
And
so
she
will be the conservator.
She is in California.
Yeah. So in our documents, the conservator comes first, but it could be whatever makes sense, and it would be through a court order. And by the way, if it's conservatorship, it would be a probate code 2580 petition.
All right. So Tracy's asking if they're state specific. She's, for example, what happens if a beneficiary moves to another state?
Well, one thing is the lien is for any Medicaid used if it's a self-settled trust, and this is only if it's a self-settled trust. So that's if it's the beneficiary's money going into settlement or that sort of thing. The lien is for any Medicaid used from day one. So I know from an administrator's standpoint, now we've got two Medicaid agencies to deal with, and that's if they stay there and don't move somewhere else. Here, otherwise, the issues of moving to another state would be just finding a state that can serve the beneficiary well.
Well, let me
I don't know if I'm answering that. What am I missing here?
maybe, but let me see what I heard her say there. She says, what if, like my son's here in California, what if he moves to Florida? What happens to what he has as an account here? Is he able to grab it? Because you already said earlier it's more difficult to get it out and do that kind of stuff. So what happens in that case? So my son's in California, he moves to Florida.
If there's even a possibility of doing that. And by the way, even if there's not a possibility, you should ask these questions because people move. They really do. And go back to this. I know I said this before, but in California, our biggest export are Californians, so I'm staying put. I may be the last one here, but, we do get a lot of people that move. So that might even lean towards what pooled trust are you interested in? Now, let's say you really just wanted to work with us because we're so wonderful. Of course we are. Here, our policy is that we will make a lateral transfer at I think we charge $50. It probably costs us $100 at work to charge the $50, but and we would help you find a pooled trust in Florida. By the way, Florida probably has more pooled trust per capita than anywhere else. I don't know what's going on in Clearwater, Florida, but I bet you on every street corner there's a pooled trust. I don't know when it's all
right next to Starbucks.
Yeah, that's just right. Starbucks. Yeah, you get your venti latte, and so. But we go back to this. Not all pooled trusts are the same. And here's the other thing that I would say. We go back to this language that I put in the PowerPoint that I don't dare put up at this point because we're all freaked out about the equipment here. But I'd even look at if there's more than a couple $100,000, I still like doing a separate trust and putting in it that the trustee would be the Golden State Pooled Trust, or a pooled trust here. Or the trustee would either be a pool trust, a corporate trustee, a private professional fiduciary, or something along that line of a trust protector's choosing. Because maybe you go to Florida and it turns out that Hunky Dory Bank and Trust down the street is doing a fantastic job. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Keep your options open. That there is no single answer for the disability community. It would be easier if there were.
Well, I think that point you're making is well served because you're saying work with people who understand the need to be flexible. Because we as parents, as kids with disability, we have all got to be flexible in terms of how we engage that. Amy says that you had mentioned corporate and fiduciaries often won't take a trust if the trust isn't large enough. You were referring more towards, like my son's trust was a first party court ordered trust that was over $1 million. So,
right.
But
let's say it was 200,000.
Right.
Good luck. Now, by the way, in Florida, maybe they go, that's wonderful. In the San Francisco Bay Area, I only know one that might consider it, and that would be pulling a favor.
Right.
Yeah.
So they just want larger accounts. To be able to
and we're seeing that more and more. I think a lot of what's going on in the trustee industry, or I probably should use another term, is that a lot of folks have taken these trusts. And let's face it, these are the hardest trusts that these trust companies work with here. And what we're seeing is the minimums go up and up and up. So there's a local community trust here. I won't name it, but for years and years and years, their minimum was $250,000. Then they ran into problems. Then they jumped it up to $2 million. Now they're down to $1 million. If you named them as your successor trustee, and let's say you were leaving $500,000 in the trust, you might be expecting this corporate trustee to take over. And when the time comes, they're not going to do it. So that's why even the trustee that you think is terrific today, we don't know what the future is. Keep your options open. And ideally work with an attorney who knows the different options in their community. Go back to, you're buying the experience of the law office, not just a document. And so once again, for you attorneys and professionals out there, you should know your different options so you can give an educated answer. The selection of the trustee is the single greatest issue about whether or not the trust is going to work or not. Whether it's a pooled trust or an individual trust, I wish I could draft a trust that would guarantee that I'm going to protect Kathy here with a document, like I'm going to start covering her with a document and now she's protected. That's just as absurd to think that a document is going to protect your child. In the end, boy, we're getting along real well here. In the end, it's the trustee that matters. You know, that's the single greatest issue.
All right, just got a few more questions, guys. Thank you for staying with us. We usually try to stay around an hour, but we've got just a few more questions, if you don't mind, Stephen. Ziggy, not Ziggy Marley, because I would know that. Ziggy's asking, so if a self-settled pooled special needs trust is spent down to a zero balance, does that close the account? It's a couple part question.
Okay.
Loved one currently has a self-settled pooled special needs trust that we had to spend down to zero in anticipation of a lump sum from SF. I assume that's Social Security. Can that lump sum be put into that same account, or would it require the opening of a new self-settled personal pooled special needs trust?
Generally, and you'd have to look at how they work in your state. So I'll contrast it. Let's say you're with Golden State Pooled Trust. Let's say you're with WISPAC. Okay. With us, when the money is gone, that's the end of the account. And we would have to go through the whole process all over again. WISPAC, I believe, keeps their accounts open. And once again, they have a program because they have a huge retained amount that they use for their beneficiaries, which once again, in California, we're not allowed to do that. We can't retain self-settled funds. It's illegal. Some trusts do it, but unfortunately I can read. So I got to follow the law here. So like in WISPAC, you probably don't. So it would really depend. Yeah. Right. Although consider an able account for something like that. But
Mina is saying, can the excess SSDI to a child paid after the death of a parent be put in a pooled first-party trust to keep Medicaid eligibility? Aren't this starting first-party pooled trust for someone under 17? Guardianship, I believe this is only guardianship of a person. She's asking several questions.
Well, you could do it only to this degree. So keep this in mind. One of the problems we run into all the time is you're getting over-resourced. So you might be in a situation where you're getting like childhood disability benefit or that kind of thing. And maybe you're getting $1,700 or $1,800 a month, clearly not on SSI. And the problem is that person could just keep going over the resource limit, going over. So you could put the excess either in a pooled trust, you could, or in an able account. Just keep in mind, if there's a share of cost, that SSDI is still income no matter what you do, period. Okay. Hopefully that answers it.
It does. Just got three more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Gene is saying, what about a kind of toggle switch into and out of a pooled special needs trust or a private special needs trust for the beneficiary, where it is not yet known if he or she will need public benefits? Is that even possible?
We do that sort of thing all the time. Let's talk about behavioral health. Okay. I mean, I was a psych nurse for 17 years. And so good or bad, I know more about it than I did. By the way, those of you that are with NAMI California, I will be doing a presentation with Dante Allen coming up. We get that out of the way here. So the thing with a lot of folks with mental health issues is they'll have periods of time where everything is fine. And then oftentimes they'll have periods of time where they're not, right? I mean, it could be a problem with medication. A lot of it we don't even understand. And once again, keep in mind, mental health is like autism. They're all individuals, all different, and that kind of thing. But generally, that's a lot of what I see with a lot of my mental health folks. And I know a lot of families, when their loved one is going through a period where maybe they're able to work and that kind of thing, they hope and pray that that's over and it's not going to happen again. Realistically, a return of the disability is real common. So that's a situation where oftentimes we do a toggle on, toggle off. And so how would that look? And we're talking third party here. here. So it might be during, and I like to have a guidepost. So let's say we have a situation, and it doesn't have to be the same thing, but here's the question for you parents out there if you're setting it up. Under what situation would you be absolutely okay just giving cash to your kid, right? Although I have 3 sons that are not disabled, and I'd say the answer is never, but we do it anyway, right? Here. So it might be if they're able to maintain a job. I mean, sometimes that's a good indicator, maybe for 2 out of 3 years. If they're not having creditor problems, if they're not having drug problems, if, just kind of like the list here, come up with that list. And then you might include something with the trustee, and there's different ways of doing it, that during periods of time, my child, let's say, is able to maintain a job and isn't having drug problems or whatever. You might even add documented by a care manager. And care managers are great. We use lots of care managers. Then the trustee is authorized to go ahead and pay them out cash, maybe even, annuitize it, pay out, we use what are called unit trust language and that kind of thing during periods where they are not able to achieve that. I mean, it may not just be benefits, it could be creditor protection issues. Then we can lock it back down into special needs mode, right? In a way, what we want to do is we want to reward good behavior or, that sort of thing. And then we want to protect folks with this precious money during periods where there could be a problem. So mental health is a real issue. By the way, a lot of folks with disabilities will exceed your expectations, or they won't, here, and they'll do things. I have lots of folks that are working and doing really well. And if you had asked me, is this possible? I go, hell no. And, damn, these people will just exceed your expectations sometimes. And we want to do what we can to reward that. On the other hand, for instance, if they have a serious physical disability, that doesn't mean that it can't come back and that we're going to end up needing IHSS later and that kind of thing. So something where you can toggle on and toggle off, good thing.
But I'd like to add a little caveat to that. As a parent, you are also planning for the future when you're no longer here. So if you're toggling off and toggling on because you're aware of all that, the next caregiver coming along may not be as savvy as you, and you may be in a toggled off state, and he or she doesn't know how to toggle it back on, and now your child is in a bad situation. So I would caution the toggle on and toggle off unless there's some communication plan between you and that next caregiver about how that all plays out and why it's significant and where the gotchas are that we know at that time. Would you agree with that?
I would. I was on the phone this morning here with one of the leading disability advocates in the country, somebody who actually assisted in writing the ADA here. And by the way, was actually in CRIP camp, so that's as far as I'm going to go here. And we were talking about that this morning here about the problem with some trustees who don't know any better is they think their job is to keep your kid on SSI and Medicaid or Medi-Cal, whatever you're going to call it. Whenever I'm sitting in a room, I always ask people, how many of you would like to be on SSI and Medicaid? I mean, Keith, how would you like to be on SSI or Medicaid? And go, hell no. I mean, not me. I don't want to be. I mean, God bless the people that are doing it and how they make it. If we can use these trusts to help them be able to support themselves, I mean, because really working is the true avenue to independence for persons with disability. It's a challenge. It's hard. By the way, db101.org, it's a wonderful website that can help you try to do that. But for people, for me as a trustee, if I can get somebody off of SSI and Medicaid and be able to lead a life where they're not subject to the whims of government agencies, that is true independence. And when I get those opportunities, it's something that really excites me. Not everybody can do that, but when it's possible, for God's sake, get a job.
Right.
No, so the job shouldn't be to keep him on a welfare program. The job should be working on the best quality of life possible. And if that leads to true independence by working, and I can help with that transition, show me where I can sign up.
All right. Amy's asking something about regarding she's been doing interviews with fiduciaries, and she says she's not been asked a question about the size of her account, which is surprising to me. That a fiduciary,
it's shocking.
That's like their first thing. Do you have $1 million? No. Well, we really shouldn't have this conversation. But apparently she's been having conversations with people. Amy, I would suggest that you let them know that here's your balance, what you expect to have, so that they can tell you yay or nay. Because what you don't want to have happen is you think they're going to accept your account, and then when you're gone, they don't accept your account. Because what happens next? So be honest.
It really depends on your region too. I can generally place an account with a private fiduciary in Northern California, 250,000 or more. In Southern California, they're getting. I mean, there's a marketplace here. I know this sounds terrible. Anything less than 500,000, you're going to have a struggle. The other thing with it is a lot of the younger fiduciaries, and this is how they learn, will take the smaller, tougher cases, but you got to be really careful, because if you get a fiduciary that takes too many of them, they'll get overwhelmed real quick. Having some way to be able to change the fiduciary, I think, is absolutely essential. The other thing with the fiduciary is, I know a lot of parents, what they want to do is they want to get the youngest fiduciary, by the way, the youngest attorney they can find, so they can outlive their child. Which I guess if that's the measure, well, that's the end of me, because I'm 69 years old. But, I know that's a factor, but that should not be the driving force. But, how you're going to transition, because I'd be willing to guess if you had a 17-year-old, and let's say you had a $500,000 trust, that trust is going to go through at least 3 changes of trustees during that kid's life. There's, and I know it's desirable just to have one and all that, but this is why using trust protectors and advisory committees, in my world, even with a pooled trust, helps keep that continuity, because this is a long-term game.
And I think that's true, because in my trust that you guys did, we did include that trust protector. It just has extended family members who are going to be in my son's life for his entire life to be part of the discussion, whether it's trustee A, trustee B, trustee C down the line. So definitely encourage you to do that.
And it kind of helps with roles too, because you go back to this. I do this program from time to time with NAMI, and we'll see if I can insult somebody, called Why You Shouldn't Make Your Daughter the Trustee of Your Bipolar Son's Special Needs Trust. It's not a good idea. And a lot of people will do that. One, because they think it's cheaper. In the end, it probably isn't. The other thing is, what did your daughter ever do to you? I mean, that's really any sibling, and I know there's exceptions to this, okay? A sibling overseeing the funds of another sibling isn't a natural thing to begin with, especially when the sibling is also the remainder beneficiary. I think the better role is as a trust protector, which is kind of like an overseer, where they can let the professional trustee do their stuff and all that, oversee how the trustee is working. And if for some reason, it may not be just because the trustee did something the trust protector didn't like, we are going to see the industry grow, and we're going to see more options for administration of special needs trust, because there's families all over the country here, not just the folks on this call, that are going through the same thing. Where can I find some system, something that's going to provide that advocacy for my loved one for the rest of their life? And once again, I love our government. I love our system. I wouldn't trust it as far as I can throw it. In all, like, we're watching reductions in services. What they're paying the caregivers is insulting, right? The caregivers that are doing the work here for our direct service provider agencies, they deserve more than minimum wage for the wonderful work they do. We are a system in crisis. It's been in crisis for some time. COVID was like throwing gasoline on it, and we're going to see some real negative changes, and we need your advocacy, or else paying for these things privately will be the only option, which concerns me, because not everybody can afford to set up these trusts,
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Well, we are at the end of the webinar. We have answered the majority of the questions. But I always like to leave with, you have any last words of wisdom you'd like to leave with us, Stephen? I have none, but I appreciate you being here with us today.
No, I really appreciate, being able to talk to your folks today here. Once again, a couple things to look at, especially for you parents that are advocates. I know this stuff isn't easy. I wish I had easy answers for you, but and all of that. I think the more you learn, the better. Get to know your different trust management options. Absolutely, pooled trusts can do so much more than handle small accounts. I know a lot of people look at these as, well, this is where we put the little accounts here and all of that. But you know what? I'm seeing pooled trusts across the country being leaders here in their communities. And when you have an advocacy-based pooled trust, I think not only is it good for the beneficiaries, it's good for our communities here. The last thing is just really this. I know many of us are getting advocacy fatigue. I feel like if I write one more letter or send one more email, I'm going to pull my hair out. So we may all be bald by the time we're done here, but here's the deal. If you really care, not just about your loved one, but once you get involved in this, as I say, nobody volunteers for our community. Usually we were drafted in one way or the other. Nobody asked me here. But, once you are involved, and if you went to the trouble of listening to this rambling attorney for over an hour here, that means you care about our community. So here's the deal, kids. We need to really support our disability community more than ever before. So be involved with NAMI, be involved with the ARC, be involved with Autism Speaks. Here, think about being on the board of your local pooled trusts. Without it, we could see some serious setbacks for our community, and it's tough enough. With that, Keith, I want to thank you so much. Check out my YouTube channel. The information was sent out there. And with that, I think Mrs. Dale says it's lunchtime upstairs. So there we go.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you soon. And I will send out the PDF that he was talking from that we had a challenge with a little earlier. You guys, thanks all for coming. Thank you again, Stephen.
Okay. Happy advocating.